Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Tracy Sabetta with the National Wildlife Federation, and I'm a member of the Ohio Equity Team. The Equity Team is a committee of the Ohio Energy Table, funded in part by the REAMP Energy Network. The theme for our monthly speaker series is equity as it relates to environmental justice and climate resiliency. It's the goal of the team to encourage members of Ohio's BIPOC communities to be more engaged with issues of the environment and to ensure community voices are heard by our decision makers. On behalf of the Equity Team, we appreciate you giving your time to be with us today. I've been looking forward to today's conversation. I'm sure you all have been as well. So there will be time for questions during today's event. So please feel free to drop them in the chat box at any time during the conversation. I'm going to hand it over now to Cheryl Johncox, who will kick off our discussion. Cheryl.
Thank you, Tracy. Good afternoon. My name is Cheryl Johncox, and I am an organizer with the Beyond Dirty Fossil Fuels program with the Sierra Club. I reside in occupied Lenape and Shawnee territories, so-called Central Ohio. And I've been blessed to call Shelly and Guy my friends and co-conspirators for many, many years. I'm honored today to be able to open this conversation with them. And we're going to shift just a little bit today, and we're going to observe the cultural norms of the Indigenous community by letting Shelly and Guy introduce themselves. Shelly?
Thank you for that, Cheryl. Good afternoon. My name is Shelly Corbin. I am Itazucho Minikoju of the Lakota Nation. I'm originally from Wambalipaha and Mataha, which is Eagle Butte, South Dakota, also known as the Cheyenne River Reservation in north central South Dakota. I currently reside in Grove City, Ohio, and I also work with Sierra Club as the campaign rep for the Beyond Dirty Fuels campaign for the Ohio area. And it is an honor and a privilege to be moderating today's event. And with that, I will pass on to Guy to give his introduction, and then we'll follow that up with the beginning of our questions.
Hi there. I want to make sure that, can you all hear me? Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Guy Jones. I'm originally from the Standing Rock Reservation. I live on the South Dakota side of Standing Rock. That's where I was born and raised. And I lived most of my life here in Dayton, Ohio. I've been in Dayton for over 40 some odd years now, and working in a number of different areas and things. One of the things that was really intriguing is that when I first came to Ohio was the number of burial and sacred sites that existed here in Ohio. And then I also began to realize that the destruction that was taking place in regards to those sacred sites. Currently today, there's a little over, I think it's 6,500 now, and remaining sites. And so, that was kind of my, beginnings of a lot of the work that here in Dayton, Ohio. I think it was 1989 was the first pipeline I ever got involved in, and that was here in southwestern Ohio. It was a pipeline that was running from Red Lines, Ohio to Richmond, Indiana by the American Natural Resources. I think that was the name of the company, but yeah, that was in 1989. And that was kind of the beginning for me in regards to the environment and my involvement with a number of different organizations at that time, and just what all transpired and took place relating to not only environment, but also to a lot of the social justice issues, because most people don't, how can I say this? There's a tremendous amount of people who work strictly on the surface. And there's a lot of political policies, rules, regulations. There's a number of things that take place behind the scenes and under a lot of it. And it's really takes an tremendous amount of effort. And everybody has their own perception in regards to what exactly is in the environment. And so, it's like, so it's always been interesting in the sense that I've always found myself educating people to a various different perceptions. And that's been kind of my work here in Ohio. So, but there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more to my history, but we don't have enough time.
Yes, thank you, Guy. You bring up a really good, important, 1989 was the year I was born. And so just think by the time when I was being born, you were already fighting oil and gas infrastructure in Ohio, and, just the different concepts and all the work that you've done, in Ohio, paving the way for, Indigenous members of the community like myself. And so, well, thank you for your introduction. We'll start out with the first question, and that is, what is environmental justice to you?
What is environmental justice? Well, the one thing to me, it is, and it comes down to that whole perception in the sense that the other day, somebody asked me the question, are you a water protector? And my response to them is that I am Lakota. And they were like, no, are you a water protector? And I said, I'm a Lakota. And it's like, that right there says an awful lot, should say an awful lot to a lot of people. Mainly for the fact of the lack of knowledge in a sense, because first of all, as a Lakota, how we are born and raised and in a sense and how we are reared. And it's like, because we are a part of creation, we are creation. The environment with which we live in. I myself, I'm water. I'm minerals. I'm dust. I'm stardust. And so having that relationship and an understanding that I am water and how important water is not only to my existence, but the existence of more to come that are just like me, to generations to come. The future. So it becomes vitally important in a sense that, I have that understanding in regards to water, the importance of it, clean water, and how important water is to life itself, taking care of the earth, understanding how the earth, the functions and how it works, and taking care of that, because everything that I am comes from the earth. And whether it be that, it's a member of the four-legged, or it's a plant, or it could be, it could be medicine. And, and then it's like, I just had a bout with COVID, and, the teas, bitter root, bare root, all of those things, how important that was to my health and well-being. So, so that perception and how I look at it. And then when you look at mainstream, I sometimes I get on Facebook and I will see people who, I guess, basically they're what they refer to as keyboard warriors, activists. And I mean, they're sitting there posting all the latest memes or whatever they call them, all the latest postings in a sense. And, it is really sad because it's right there is evidence that the lack of knowledge in regards to their culture and that relationship. Because as Lakotas, we are told about our relationships and what are those relationships are, the relationships to men, the relationships to women, the relationships of family, and the importance of family, the importance of community. And what exactly is community? Community is unity. I explained this morning briefly to a few friends that the Miami Valley Council for Native Americans, and that word "for" is vitally important because the people who are born here, they're Native. That's the reality. And they say, well, oh, I'm Native American. No, this is where you were born. And because you were born here, then that community, that unity, we have to begin to not only acknowledge, but begin to realize our existence and their existence in this. And that, you know, yes, they may not be concerned about the climate or the environment, but somebody needs to. And so, you know, I seek out those individuals, and those individuals, I either seek them out or they find me. And we develop these relationships to work on the issues of water. You know, we have a number of issues right here in our own communities, not only just here in Dayton, but, you know, I work with some organizations down in Cincinnati that are dealing with some issues down there in regards to development, progress. And I mean, you know, it's what's happening in Cincinnati is what progress is doing down there is creating more parking lots. And with more parking lots, you got more runoff. That runoff runs into the sewage system, an outdated system. And when that system, because it's outdated, that system doesn't work. And what usually ends up happening is raw sewage gets dumped into the Ohio River. And, you know, and that's happening. That's just like, you know, prior to this meeting, you know, prior to this get together, you asked me how much rain we had. You know, that rain, I watch and I monitor the rain, the fall, you know, because I realize that with these outdated systems, what's going to happen to the water? And, you know, what's happening to the water, what's happening downstream. So, you know, having that awareness and that knowledge, and I try to share that knowledge with a number of people. And it's not just so, you know, when we talk about the environment is everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I talked about those relationships, community, the relationship that we have with the earth, the relationship that we have with our maker. But what's most important is the relationship that we have with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and I tell people that all the time, you know, who are you? Because people ask me all the time, who are you? You know, so, you know, and that's vitally important. Where are we? Are we going to be those keyboard warriors posting memes on the news stories or the flash line on Facebook and on Twitter and all this other stuff? Are we actually going to get involved and do something?
Which basically leads to our next question, which I think is very, very important to bring up right here, is if I'm looking to do something, if I'm somebody who is moved by, you know, by your speech today or your words, or if I'm looking to get involved in my community, how do I do that? How do I become, you know, quote unquote, an environmental justice advocate? Or, you know, how would I begin to do that if I haven't been in this space before?
And if you've never been in that space before, and I tell you, one of the first things I tell people is to listen. Because once you begin to listen, you're going to find and hear those things, those comments in those places. You're going to find them in the most unusual places. That's just like, you know, a lot of times, because people will question me, you know, about even, I go to church. I'll go to church periodically, mainly for the fact that, and everybody says, oh, you're a Christian. And I'm like, well, I'm a confirmed Episcopalian. I like the ritual of communion. That makes me feel good. So I go take communion for my own well-being, for it makes me feel good. Now, does that make me a Christian? Well, to some people it may do, but to me, I'm Lakota first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
That likes the ritual of communion by the Episcopal Church. But it doesn't make me a Christian. So, you know, but when I go, I'll listen and hear what people have to say. And I engage in conversation to find that. You know, you can find it at schools, you know, it's or even the strangest places. You know, I've been to city parks and had conversations. And, you know, so just engage in those conversations. But the biggest part was listening. And you'll be surprised at where you're going to find, you know, what you're going to find by listening. because that's one of the things that, I have that conversation with a number of various people in regards to how important it is for us, especially people who talk about unity. We need to learn to listen, because we're not doing enough of it now. Everybody has their agenda, and we need to have that unity needs to be a part of that first foremost. So
We have a question that is relevant to the topic in the conversation right now. And it is, how can we continue to educate or reach those who don't understand the interrelatedness of humans and the land?
say that again.
How do we continue to educate and reach those who don't understand the interconnectedness of humans and land?
And that's one of the things that, and it comes back to that, what I was saying about listening, because, it's, to build on where people are at, to build on that, because, it's, obviously, if they have an interest or somebody's interest, they have a little bit of knowledge, whether it be a little bit or a whole lot. But to build on that foundation for what they believe in, and then, and then to work from there. And in the sense that I was talking this morning with some individuals about a young man here in town that, initially that conversation began with his addiction and what he liked and what he was doing. And now he's now leading a group of individuals almost bi-weekly cleaning the river, because I found out what he liked. And I said, well, I said, wouldn't it be awesome? I said, if you could do all of these things in clean water? He's like, well, yeah. So we talked about nature and creation and how that all works. And so now, it's like, he was just in Dayton. He was on the news last week, where he led a number of citizens, about 40 people, cleaning the river. And, and that was like, I was really proud. I was proud of that fact that, he is able to get that many people to clean the river. And so, and so how that whole engagement, and it was only because I listened. Because you see, one of the things is that I'm an alcoholic. So, I could relate to him. And, and that was the beginning of a conversation. And now where that conversation has taken not only myself, but my relationship with him and what he is doing. So, and it's like, and who benefits from it? Everybody.
Absolutely.
Because he's cleaning the water. He's taking care of this planet, this earth.
That's awesome. I really like, in terms of kind of just with active listening here, just listening to you talk about how, you found this like shared value and understanding, you were able to relate and connect to this individual. And then from there, creating, a connection and a relationship where you guys found, yourself in unity and generating the solution to an issue within your community. And that sounds to me exactly, what we're all trying to do in these moments and in these current times is ultimately, we all understand the challenges that, Mother Earth is facing and the impact of humans that have, that and the impact of climate change really. And so it sounds to me like you're doing exactly that in your community within Dayton and beyond.
Yeah, and I try, and that's one of the things, like I was saying, that understanding those relationships, that's culturally, that's how I was brought up. And, and how that has affected not only my thinking, but, and what I do and my actions. So, culturally, but, and that's the one thing is that, and I try to reiterate that to a number of people in a sense that like, even, and I'll ask them questions because, like even, I had some interactions last month with some individuals and so I asked them questions and then because they were talking to me and they said, so, talking to me about various different things in regards to not only their own spiritual path, but a number of things. And I said, well, obviously, I said, you're a Christian and you read the Bible. And they said, like, yeah. And I said, so what did Jesus do? I said, Jesus went into the wilderness. Jesus went into the garden. Jesus went up to the mountaintop and I said, he connected. I said, he reconnected with the earth. I said, our mother, we do that. And I said, and Jesus did it as well. He reconnected. I said, he didn't go seeking counseling from, this individual or that place, didn't go to that place. I said, Jesus went into the wilderness. I said, so, I said, it's right there for you. I said, it's no different. I said, it's just said in a different way. It's just related in a different way. It's still the same.
Absolutely. So how do if I want to create that relationship with the living world, how do I do that? And I mean, and I could say that in terms of like, some might look at this as, like, well, how do I create a relationship with a plant? How do I create a relationship with a tree or even with the water? Like, how would I go about doing that?
And it's like, and that's one of the things, like even with my kids sometimes, my kids will go out places and I'll tell them, take your shoes off. And, and their feet on the ground. And I said, and just listen. And I said, and just, empty your mind, just look. And they were like, what was that, Daddy? And I said, that's the earth. That's the earth talking to you, that vibration. And, and that connection. And I said, and it exists. And I mean, have you ever gone someplace and just kind of put your back up against a tree? And then you just kind of sit there and all of a sudden you can begin to feel it. And, and that's that connection. And that's, and it's real. And of course, immediately, it's, that's just like, that I tell people sometimes there's things in this life that, we are told not to. I said, it's like, you hear such things as witchcraft, all of these, that sort of terminology. And I said, and that's one of the things is that, these connections, these things truly exist in a sense that, and if you listen to them, and I said, and even at that, I said, if you listen to creation, and it's like, and one of the things that I tell, like a lot of young people, and I said, what can you learn? You ask me about the rain, and I was like, and I tell, and I said, think about this. I said, you have this sphere, which we refer to as the earth. I said, it exists within another sphere. I said, but this sphere, the inner sphere, the earth, is rotating. And it's rotating inside this other sphere. So when you get, one is positive and one is negative. And when you get them, and when it's rotating, there's friction. And what is it doing? That friction is creating energy. And I said, and that energy, as it is building, I said, suddenly it reaches a point where there's a release. And I said, and the earth releases itself, which is the female. I said, it releases itself. And I said, in a form of lightning. And when it releases itself, it stimulates this outer sphere, which is negative. And I said, and that's the male. And I said, so when the female stimulates the male, I said, what's the male do? I said, like with most men. I said, when a man gets excited, I said, he begins to boast. You hear it. Oh, it's thunder.
Mhm.
And I said, once that thunder happens, I said, then you have rain. I said, and that release, that rain fertilizes the earth and life continues. You know, that's a lesson there. And what does that tell you? That it just that alone tells you about the relationship of men and women and life and the circle of life. And, you know, so I share that with people. And if you just listen long enough, and if you watch, you know, observe things, you'd be amazed at what you can actually learn.
Mhm.
And I said, and that, I said, is what the Lakotas, I said, wope. I said, natural law. These are natural laws. This is a natural order. And I said, and there are people who try to, you know, change that. They can't change that. Because, you know, it's like with, you know, one of the things that I share with a lot of, you know, young people, I said, is that, I said, it's important to look at, and I said, and this system today, I said, a lot of people refer to it as the Fibonacci. I said, but the Lakotas, we knew about that a long time ago. We know the importance of one, but we also know, I said, the importance of zero. I said, we have that knowledge of zero. And I said, and that alone, I said, just that knowledge alone, we were able to change the world with the concept of zero. And technology exists today because of that concept of zero.
Mhm.
And I said, so that's the beginning. And I said, then there's one. And then with one, there's two. Then there's four. Then there's eight. And I said, the sequence that happens. And I said, and if you not understand that, I said, so you'll begin to see all these various things and how they came about. And I said, and I said, you know, I said, what's really wild is, I said, is that I went to a ceremony up in New York with the Senecas, and they were giving thanks. And I sat there all day and they were still giving thanks. And, you know, but if you understand the relationships of all of these things and how these things happen, they even were giving thanks to the ant and the role that an ant plays in creation and how important that ant's life is to that evolution, that circle of life. And I was like, wow, that is really profound, because we never think about that. A lot of people don't ever think about that. And, you know, and then it's like, and so that's why, you know, like even now, you know, my kids and everything, you know, this past summer, they were eating peaches and they were like, threw the seed in the trash. And I said, no, save that seed. And they were like, what? And I said, save the seed. And they were like, well, what are we going to do with it? And I said, give it back to the earth. I said, an animal may eat it, or that seed may grow. We don't know. But I said, let's give it back to the earth. I said, you're going to just throw it in the trash and it's going to end up in a landfill somewhere. And I said, no, give it back. Take care of this planet, take care of this life. I said, that's the environment.
Mhm.
That's environmental thinking. Taking care of life. Life is about the environment. So.
Absolutely. They're so intertwined. You can't have one without the other, especially.
Mhm.
Moving on to our next question. How do environmental issues disproportionately impact communities with high poverty?
Well, I tell you, it's there's a segment of our society, and that segment is, in this society, there's a number of people who you have the haves and the have-nots. And, and it's like, and that's where, like even for a brief second this morning, we discussed Maslow's theory and how that, how to Indigenous people, how we relate to that theory and where we are in that pyramid. And, and it's like, and that's where like, so we have to look at these things in a sense that 5 years ago, there was a number of kids who, the youth from Standing Rock. It was before there was a Standing Rock, the camp, the runners. And those young people were coming through Ohio and they were coming through Dayton. And so I invited them and I told them, I said, we wanted to feed you. And so they came to Sunwatch. So we were sitting out behind Sunwatch and we were sitting out there underneath of a tree. And I said, do you see that up there? And it was like, what is that? What is that, a hill? And I said, what is that? I said, that's a landfill. I said, that's West Dayton. I said, they put that landfill in West Dayton. I said, West Dayton is predominantly Black. I said, so they put it in there. And I said, and what exactly is that? And I said, that's what in this society, I said, you hear a number of people talk about. I said, that's environmental racism. That was like, what? And I said, environmental racism. I said, and poverty. I said, I said, that's right there. I said, they're poor people. Because I said, it's not just Black people or people of color. I said, it's also about class. And I said, and these things go into, I said, the poor communities. I said, you have a segment of our society, I said, which is actually a very small percentage. And I said, but that percentage is growing. And it really grew during COVID. During COVID, that small percentage actually grew. But you have those individuals that I said who are profiting off of the poor. And I said, so it's important that you all have an understanding of capitalism. Because I said, capitalism only works when you have the poor. I said, you need to have people who have needs. And I said, and that's how capitalism works. So I said, the more poor people you have, the more money gets generated, because the more poor people you have, the more there is needs. I said, how do you fix that? Start growing your own garden. I said, learn how to make your own clothes. I said, learn how to can food. I said, there's a number of things that can be done. And I said, and learn about the functions and how the system. I said, there's a system. I said, there's a systemic system that exists within this society. And they were like, what is systemic? So I began to explain to them about the various systems that exist. And, and I said, a lot of that gets perpetuated. And I said, within educations and churches. And they were like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, there's a dominance. I said, to create these imagery. I said, I said, when Dances with Wolves came out, I said, take a look at that image. I said, people suddenly were like the white buffalo calf woman. I said, take a look at that. I said, now, in the beginning, I said, she actually had color. I said, she looked like me.
Mm-hmm.
I said, but as she became popular, because suddenly, not only did we have wannabes, but we have wannabe Lakotas. We now have people doing sun dances in Indiana and over here in Southern Ohio and in Kentucky. Those are wannabe Lakotas. You know, you got people doing sweat lodges. But suddenly, as that number grew, her complexion began to change. And now when you look at the imagery of the white buffalo calf woman, so, you know, all you have to do is just put blonde hair on it. It looks like a white woman.
Mhm.
I said, that imagery. I said, that is part of that systemic racism that exists, that imagery. You know, I had that conversation with my my daughters who get into anime. And I said, why is it that you have these cartoons? I said, they all look like white people. I said, that imagery. So I said, how that affects us. And so, you know, these systemic racism. So I said, not only is it entertainment, but it's also to education. We're having that conversation regarding these statues in Columbus. We're having
Absolutely.
these, you know, we're having these conversations regarding mascots. You know, we've been having these conversations for a long, long time. And what those imageries and what they do and how it affects our children. And, you know, in a sense that, and I mean, you know, and it goes down to, that's why I really encourage my children, even now, you know, like, you know, and I tell people this all the time, and in a sense that, you know, that's where I kind of get a bit disenchanted, because, you know, you have all these people on Facebook going, Ihani wash day. And I'm like, you know, and what they're doing is, you know, that's good morning. And I'm like, why are you thinking like that? Because you see, you know, my grandmother and my grandfather, you know, when I'd see them, they'd say, how, Dakoja. And that word, how, you know, I see you. Because you're acknowledging yourself, as
Mhm.
well as acknowledging that is what is around you. I see you. So that acknowledgement is vitally important, that we are the same. I see you.
Absolutely. And so greetings in the systemic sense that are used currently basically are another like disassociated greeting that doesn't necessarily acknowledge us as individuals, as spirits, as living beings
Mhm.
on this Mother Earth. And
Right.
instead it's just a greeting. It's just a
Mhm.
saying that's really ultimately like kind of, you know, I would say empty, that doesn't
Mhm.
have meaning, and it doesn't really have intention behind it,
Yes.
and should ultimately, you know, and we've had conversations about this, about, you know, even the phrase that's overly used, the how are you phrase,
Mhm.
when they don't really have the time, the energy, or the effort to actually give that person that they're saying that to actually
Mhm.
hear them, their
Mhm.
story, their struggle, their pain, where they are on their journey.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, definitely hear you there with greetings, and how a lot of them in currently and how they're used doesn't actually benefit us in actually connecting as living beings and or humans.
Mhm. Yeah. And I mean, you know, so it's about that mentality. So when we talk about environmental justice, we really need to do a self-evaluation, in the sense that where we are at mentally in this. And, you know, and then it's like, and at what are we, because that's the one thing that so many people, they'll hear things, or they'll see things, and then they morally they begin to feel empathy. But then as soon as they realize what they have to give up, then they kind of back away. And, you know, and in a sense that, you know, it's like, you know, do they want to give up their cell phones?
Mm.
Do they rather than walking to the corner store or walking, or even riding a bike? Do they want to do that? So are they going to, no, they don't want, they'd much rather get in their car and go. It's like limiting that.
Mm-hmm.
That's just like, there's simple things, and we hear this all the time. And I mean, even in the sense that just hitting the light switch, turning it off, saving that energy. And so that's one of the things that, where we are at mentally. That's why I tell people, it's like, that's, even as Lakotas, like I was saying, one of the most important relationships is the one that we have with ourselves. Understanding that and how vitally that is important, that how that affects us mentally. So, it's like, and that's where, and I tell people that all the time, where are you or how are you? It's like, where are you at with this?
Yes. And I can attest to that. Guy calls me up and he says, where are you? And I'm like, I'm right here, Guy. I'm right here. I'm with you. I know where you're at. And so it's really, I mean, it's nice to definitely know that I have, support from Guy and from our growing community and my growth. And ultimately what you're pointing out is that that reflection of self and having that self-awareness and knowing who you are, but also understanding that you're a part of the system, the system that ultimately is perpetuating, systemic, we could use the words racism or, systemic violence, modern day violence in the term, especially for us with mascot use or statues and symbols, that can be considered as a very oppressive, especially to the communities in which it harms. So continuing harm and violence. And so really it comes down to this reflection of, unlearning some of the practices and the, some of the things that we were taught, whether it be in education or schools or social structures, that we were taught how to cope or to deal and operate really within the system. And now we're having to learn a better way, a more connected way, a more cohesive way. And, that comes with, growing, and ultimately understanding what it is that you're doing in the space and the impact that you do have on the living world to include, humans and plants and energy and, where you get your energy and the impact it has on some community somewhere. So it'd be important to turn off your lights and to minimize your water use or to, minimize or to just know that you have a level of impact in your relationship with energy and with your household things that just come as, in the current system, just come as a norm. And so, we have another question that we want to move to. And just to get clarification, Cheryl, the question is, what are the biggest energy issues that you see affecting your community?
And I tell you, and that's where, like, even now, and you were there, Shelly, with me in a sense that, because everybody is doing all this popular stuff, and it's like in regards to fossil fuels and, the climate change and, whatever the news feeds us, that's what everybody jumps on. But what is really changing now, that's just like back in June. And, in a sense that, and I tell people this, and I said, what's really crazy is I said, is that back in June, I said, we met this individual by the name, I said, who is now deceased. His name is Myron Dewey. And it was on a dirt road in Minnesota. And my relationship with Myron Dewey in regards to, and it was always like, because the first time I'd ever met him, he said, who are you? And I said, Guy Jones. And, and even at that, he would always say, who are you? And I said, Guy Jones. So when we met on that road, he said, hey, you're Guy Jones. And I said, yeah. He said, I want to talk to you. And so we talked about, our future, things to come. We talked about lithium batteries.
Yes, we did.
Everybody is getting away from, fossil fuels. The fossil fuel industry is almost dead. And, and because people are beginning to realize, finally, a segment of society is beginning to realize what we are doing to this planet in regards to climate change. So there's this big shift, but, it's going to what everybody calls green energy. But, even at that, we as human beings, as man, what we've done, because for every action, there's a reaction. So we talked about those lithium, because Bureau of Land Management and all of these agencies that oversee things are giving permits for mining out west in regards to lithium. Now, the amount of water that it takes in mining that lithium is ungodly. What happens to that wastewater? And what damage is that going to do to that water? And, and it's like, and so the effect that it's going to have on water. And then, because see, though that lithium is coming here to Kentucky, and they're building those batteries right here in our backyard in Kentucky. And that whole manufacturing process, and, and the effects of lithium batteries. Because you see, even when a lithium battery fails and it catches on fire, it burns at 1600 degrees. And the only thing that's going to put out a fire of that magnitude is PFAS. And what is PFAS? What effects is that going to have on the environment? So these are the things that we need to begin to, that's why I was saying mentally.
Mm-hmm.
We have to begin to look at our future, because everybody right now is so reactionary. I mean, you can get on Facebook and you just look at it and everybody's reacting. Very few are actually doing something. Everybody's reactionary. We have to take a look at the future that we're building. Sure, we're getting away from fossil fuels. But what are we getting into next? What are we doing? What is this next step that we're doing? We need to go and create safeguards. And how do we do that? Well, we have to get with these lawmakers, these people, these corporations. We as people have to come together and begin to really deal with that. But, you got all of these activists sitting at their keyboard, doing what's popular, feeling good about themselves. And in reality is that y'all ain't looking at the future. And that's where we need to be. We need to be visionaries. At one time, this country, not only was it just Native people, but this country was a nation of visionaries. We were a nation of inventors, innovators. We led the world in a number of things. But then there was a shift where suddenly we began to build weapons of mass destruction. Because we realized there was a segment of our society realized that there's money to be made in war. And we changed. Our government changed. Our society changed. And, and it's like, and that's where, and everything else began to slowly, gradually change.
Yes, you definitely bring, an important, topic for conversation, which is ultimately, like the greenwashing of current proposed energy transition which is, to green energy, we could talk about hydrogen and
Mhm.
CCUS and, basically, even the existing energy that's right now, which is solely based in fossil fuels, but really looking at, the electrical grid and, solar and, we get to all the issues with the batteries, which, you definitely touched on, how the impact that it's already having to tribal nations out west,
Mhm.
and with permits and water rights and the destruction that it's ultimately causing the land, and the poison that it's ultimately wreaking havoc.
Mhm.
And what we do to the earth, we do to ourselves inherently because of that connectedness. And so really, what you're kind of mentioning and alluding to is that mentality is so critical in being visionary so that we can lead the next 7 generations, which in our culture is whatever we do now, we take into consideration the impact that we're doing better for the next 7 generations so that they can actually exist
Mhm.
and they would actually come to fruition. And yes, I do agree that there's not enough conversation about whether it is instead of renewable energy or green energy, there's not enough conversation about the concept that maybe we're taking too much,
Mhm.
that maybe we're living beyond our means.
Mhm.
And maybe, materialistically, we've reached a peak. And so at what, cost do we want to inherently take on as ourselves when we're looking at different proposals like, energy. And so I want to propose the last question so we can wrap up. We have about 2 minutes, which is, how do we ensure that everybody's voice is in this conversation? How do we unite that voice, and how do we get to a place where we can be visionary?
And that's one of the things today is that, like even I met with some individuals this morning, Cheryl and myself, and in the sense that creating those bridges in the sense that, and, creating those relationships and building those relationships, because so many people have gotten into that point in the sense that, that we, and it comes back to that mentality. And in the sense that, when you look at, this isn't just a Black issue. This isn't just a Hispanic issue. This isn't just a Native American issue. This is an issue that is going to affect all of us. And, and it's like, and yes, there are some people who are going to benefit from it. And then there's some people that are going to pay a bigger price. But, but we have to look at all of that and weigh those out. But those only come about by dialogue. And, and that's one of the things is that as community members, we have to, really make a concerted effort in developing our communities. And, and we, even me and you, we've had that conversations about our Kioshkas.
Mm.
And, and it's like, and how important those are. And it's good to see that, that there's, I look on Facebook, and that's one of the things is that, that those conversations are happening on reservations. The development of, the Tioshpas and the Oyates. And, and it's like, and the one word is that, like 5 years ago, a lot of people couldn't even pronounce Ochete Shikoi. And now, that everybody's saying it, and it's like, but they still don't know what it means, but they're saying it because it's a cool thing to do, that it's all about being popular on Facebook. So they say it and don't have a clue as to what the Ochete Shikoi really is. So, it's like, so having those, but it's all about the mentality.
Mm.
So.
Thank you so much, Guy, for having conversation with me for the last 55 minutes. I appreciate you. And it's such an honor to moderate and to provide the attendees, the opportunity to hear from an elder in the Indigenous community in Ohio. And with that, I will pass it to Peggy.
Thank you very much, Shelly. Shelly, Guy, Cheryl, you have done just an absolute marvelous job explaining, my goodness, relationships with ourselves, our families and communities. A lot of what's your words, Mr. Jones, that's going to stick with me for a long time. I really appreciate it. I thank all of our participants for being here and participating and giving us good questions. The other thing is I have placed our survey into the chat. We would really appreciate if you would fill that out and give us some recommendations for new speakers. Now, this is our last of our series for 2021, and we'll look forward to coming back again next year with even more good topics and more good speakers. So help us with that planning process. And thank you all. And again, Mr. Jones, that was a remarkable view into Indigenous culture. Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend.